Hey everybody, it's Tracy, and for a couple years now, block censorship in the context of Bitcoin mining has been a hotly contested item, and there's obviously the initial hurdle of whether Satoshi's vision and design really allows for true block censorship, which I don't think it does. But that aside, what are the legal issues that would compel block censorship or an attempt at it? And we saw about a year ago, Marathon mined what they considered or called a compliant block. Well, it wasn't first of all, it wasn't really compliant because some dark pools from like Russia got into it and all that. But what they were attempting to do was have an OFAC sanctions compliant block. And as a financial institution, right, if you were registered as a money service business, you would have these KYC and AML obligations, because registering a money service business kicks in your Bank Secrecy Act obligations, which is all your AML and KYC. But Bitcoin mining and miners don't have to register as MSBs. They don't fall under the purview of a money transmitter under federal definition. So even if they were registered for other reasons, they're not always acting as one, right? Like you can be an MSB, but it doesn't mean you're always acting in the capacity of an MSB. So for Marathon to mine this quote unquote compliant block was really sort of like this non sequitur, right? Like there was no real reason other than just optics, and it didn't work anyway. But OFAC is different, right? When you're talking about sanctions compliance, like I can't sell a pack of gum to North Korea, right? Or I can't do business with anybody who's on the specially designated nationals list, which is a list of like a rogues gallery of narco terrorists, whatever. And that obligation accrues to everybody, right? Whether you're an MSB or a financial institution or not, everybody has to comply with OFAC. So like the question becomes, did Marathon attempt this, which they later said we're not doing it anymore because they probably realized they couldn't do it. But would you really have that obligation? And in theory, could a regulator say, you have failed to comply with OFAC and you're subject to some kind of legal sanction, right? And so it's an interesting debate. And I think arguably, it would be very difficult to determine or effectively be held liable for doing it. But at the same time, that's terrible advice, right? And I think since OFAC applies to like everybody engaged in commerce, it would in theory apply to Bitcoin miners, but it's totally against the ethos of Bitcoin, right? Like, and no one's obviously going to do it. And there's a huge financial disincentive to actually mine compliant blocks, right? Because of the costs involved. So I think, from a very hyper technical level, are you an MSB as a Bitcoin miner? No. So you have no KYC, AML obligations. 2, do you have OFAC obligations? Hyper-technically, yes, right? I think you do. But does it make any practice? Could you actually mine compliant blocks? No, right? So it's sort of a non-starter, I think. And what they attempted to do, and like there's pressure from larger financial institutions that only wanted to purchase these clean Bitcoins and whatnot. I don't think it's possible, but I think it's something to be aware of, like if you're engaged in Bitcoin mining, only because if there was this impending sort of regulatory crackdown coming that they've been talking about for years, not just here in the States, but everywhere, right? Would that be something that they would latch onto, a regulator would latch onto? Because of course, it's everybody's obligation, whether you're required to be a financial institution or not. So it's an interesting debate, right? And I think like you're going to have the overwhelming majority of Bitcoiners saying this is complete bullshit, and I tend to agree with them. But I think it's something to at least consider if you're engaged at a high level, obviously, in Bitcoin mining. So if you have any questions, definitely hit me up, Adam at AdamTracy, TRACY.io, and I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.